a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslak. And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay!
Welcome back to the Soulful Leader Podcast. This is Maren, and I'm here with Stephanie. And yesterday in our co-creation circle, which is our mastermind, essentially, that we do with some people each year, we were talking about retiring parts of ourselves so that, it's like we think about retiring from work, or we retire for the evening, and it was this concept of letting a part of ourselves go, of like saying, you know what, that doesn't serve me anymore. It doesn't suit me anymore. It's no longer who I am. I'm going to go ahead and retire that part of myself. And it was such a fascinating conversation that Stephanie and I were like, you know what, let's continue that on the podcast. So today we wanted to bring that to our audience and talk about what would it look like for you for all of us to look at a piece of ourselves and go, you know what, that doesn't serve me anymore. Or I'm looking forward to, I'm working towards retiring that part of myself.
Yeah, because I think, we have a certain view of what retirement means, and I see this a lot, like with clients of mine who are looking forward to retirement only to get there and go, now what? And so what they've done is identified their whole identity with their work life.
Right.
And they haven't made space for what's next or what could be next. And I think, as we were saying, like redefining it, it's like, I think there's parts of us. I don't necessarily think that one has to be done with work, especially if it feels like it's a calling to you, because there's that part of you that you're not quite done with it yet. It's actually evolving you. It's actually nourishing you or growing you. But then there's other parts of ourselves where, like, I am so done with this part. Like, I'm done with it. And I can speak to myself in this recently. It's like I've really been working as a therapist for the last 30 plus years. And unfortunately, that part of me that is as a therapist gets really identified with rescuing people. Now, I really do still love therapy because it does evolve me, and I want to make a difference in the world, and I love it. So when someone says, hey, when are you ever going to retire? I go, well, I'm not retiring. But yet I'm quantifying this because there's a part of me that says, oh, no, but I'm retiring from rescuing, because that's a different thing. And it doesn't just happen in my work life. It happens in my relationship life as well. Even with my cat that I rescue, like I'm a rescuer. And it's like, I have to ask myself, why am I so, it's an addiction, really. Why am I so addicted to my identity being that? And if I wasn't that, who would I be?
I love that, because like earlier when you were talking about work, we can see clearly that our identity is often related to our work. And there's lots of studies that show people oftentimes go into a depression when they retire, because they lose their identity, they lose their friends, they lose their, whatever. We don't think of that with a part of ourselves. So I love the metaphor of retiring this part of yourself, because if you don't know what's next, if you don't have a good sense of yourself beyond your job, you will struggle. So it's going to be the same thing as if you say, you know what, I don't want to be a rescuer anymore, or I don't want to be a drama queen anymore, or I don't want to be a whatever, fill in the blank. Do you know then what you do want to be?
This is such a great thing, because it doesn't even have to be at work. I think of some of my friends who are getting married. They're retiring being single.
Mm.
but they're not retiring their soul. They're not retiring their essence. They're actually upgrading it. And so they're letting go of that identity of who they were, and they're moving into the sacred contract of making vows and
Mm.
partnership agreement of coming together and evolving. And you know what you're saying is like, if you don't know who you want to be, or even have a practice, because it is a practice, one
Right.
needs to practice like developing that new identity, that new sense. And we can feel really uncertain in that transitional. This is why, like in weddings, traditionally the bride would wear a ball, like a gown, because it creates a shape of a bell, which actually anchors you to the earth so that you're transitioning into a new archetype.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yes, and the maid of honor is actually the one who's like the guardian that guards the bride to protect her so as she transitions into it. And even the veil that comes over one's face, it's that, you know, the masculine, and I'm using this as metaphors, not as male female, but as masculine feminine energy. The masculine is the one that lifts the veil to be able to see beyond what appears, to
Hmm.
see beneath that. And so
So within ourselves, the masculine
exactly.
side of ourselves will lift the veil so that we can see what's next. And
Right.
that's
So
like in the mystic traditions, there's 20,000 veils between us and the one who sent us. And
that's
so
right.
we're constantly peeling back those veils, the things that keep us from seeing the next, the next, the next. So
And
it's a
that
process.
masculine energy is about, instead of looking outward to what's next, look
Mm.
inward to what's next. Lift the veil to go inside into that darkness, into that feminine energy to say, okay, what's there? What do I want to cultivate? And what needs to be retired? You think of even that word of like, I'm going to retire to bed now. It's like we're taking that energetic part of ourselves that's been going and doing all day long to say, I'm going to retire that part so that I can go in and receive the dreams or the insights or the awareness that are going to be landed in the dream state.
And also to replenish ourselves. We need
Mm-hmm.
that downtime, that retire, that, and I think that a lot of people do look forward to, the outward traditional work retirement because they're tired. They want, they want that space to just like, I'm
Yeah.
done. And,
They need to rest.
and so what would it be like if we did that for ourselves on a regular basis and say, you know what, I'm going to retire for the evening. I'm going to retire away from that, whatever, part of ourselves that is no longer working, at least for today, of saying, I do need that inward space. I need to take some time. I like that.
Yeah. And I mean, you're looking at that. We have a practice daily to do that, like
Mm.
when we go to bed at nighttime. And how many people do you know that are saying, oh, I struggle with sleep at night? I wake up a
Mm.
lot. And because we don't practice that balancing of that masculine and feminine energy within ourselves, or even within our actions and awareness, both outwardly and inwardly, it is a daily practice. And as our culture, we just don't really honor the different rites of passages or practices so that we can build that resonance, we can build that harmony to be able to transition gracefully and beautifully, whatever that might mean, whether that's just gracefully and transitioning from day to night.
I really like thinking of it as a practice because oftentimes I think in our culture, there's this sense that we're supposed to know what's next and it's a concrete thing. Like you mentioned marriage, right? So you know that you're going from single to not single to being married to being in a sacred contract. And yet we don't actually know what that means. Even if you've
Yeah.
been married before, your second marriage or third marriage won't be like your first one, ideally, right? And so you're growing, you're a different person, you're becoming. And so do you have a practice of discovery
Mm-hmm.
of what that will look like? I think it's important to have an idea of where you're going so that you're not completely lost. We said that at the beginning of most people when they do retire, just think of it as like, I'm just done. and
Hmm.
don't think of what's next, and then get caught in a downward spiral with that. So there is that, like, there does need to be an idea of what's next. In addition to that, there needs to be a practice of how do I discover, what's the ongoing discovery of that?
Well, I often look at with myself, like if there's something I want to retire, like I was saying, retiring my rescuer mode, and to be able to ask the question, well, if I'm not rescuing,
Hmm.
then who would I be? What, what would be different? Where would I be putting my time and my energy?
Yeah.
What's my focus? And do I have a way of practicing that so that when I'm ready to retire that fully, it's not such a shock to the system? Because I think we get really shocked. And then, of course, anytime something happens quickly, there's always a pushback. There's like a reactionary part. And I think this is what happens when I talk to married or couples who are going to get married who are saying, well, we've lived together for, a long time. Like, what's the big deal? It's just a contract. I'm like, it is, and it isn't. It's both. Because all of a sudden you're telling, on an unconscious level that you're retiring being single.
Right.
And if you haven't really consciously been working at that and looking at all the things that are standing against it, it's going to come up and rear its ugly head. And this is where people have anxiety and they say, oh, it's cold feet or different things like that. It's like, I think, we have this belief in our society that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. It'll just happen or it'll just
Mm.
unfold naturally. And it actually doesn't. It takes a practice. It takes awareness. But then we don't want to over practice and over aware, which becomes anxious. It's like, how do we hold that that balance, like the guitar string or the violin string, where it's just the right amount of tension to play music, but not enough to break it. So it's like, what is that for? And it's going to change because the more you play something, the more it's going to loosen up, or you're going to have to tighten it or loosen it. You're going to have to adjust it to find that right tone for you, that right pitch. And it's not a one and done.
No, and it's not the same for everybody either. So
Right.
it's great to have, an exemplar or a place to start, and then an exploration into what works for me versus, okay, that works for this person. I think of the 5 a.m. club. For some reason that came up to my head because I, for years, wanted to be a part of the 5 a.m. club because that was, in my mind, that was the way to be successful. And I, I, I do tend to get up early, and that's a normal thing for me. And I also was in a profession which was ballroom dancing, and it's like we work until 11 o'clock at night, and then we practice until midnight or 1 a.m. And so the 5 a.m. club was not realistic for me.
It was stressful.
It was
It was
very
straining.
stressful.
Yeah.
So yes, it does work. Did it work for me? No, not for most of my career. Did that mean that I was not going to be successful? No, that's not true. So finding exemplars or
Hmm.
examples of things that, okay, this is an option for me, at least as a starting place, and then realizing, like, okay, it may not be the ideal for me. And the reason I'm kind of bringing that up is because I want to use you as an example, if I might. Because some people might be wondering, okay, well, where do I start? One of the things that I know about you is in this process of wanting to retire this, this part of you. It started, well, I know it started many years ago, and consciously you made an agreement with yourself that this year was going to be a process of letting go of this part of yourself. Could
Hmm.
you speak more to that?
Yeah, I just, I looked at my identity of a people pleaser,
Mm.
and also, like, I got a lot of awards for being a good rescuer. I got a lot of
Mm.
results in the other world, but what wasn't sitting with me was that I wasn't taking care of me. It was out of balance, and I was attached to rescuing. So when I wasn't rescuing, then I felt bored, I felt lonely, I felt useless. And I'm like, okay, this is not working. This is not a healthy way. Like, I want to be more learning how to love and rescue my parts of myself. So here's what I mean by that is that when I'm in relationship, whether it's with business or a friendship or a partnership of any sort, there are different parts of me that show up. So if you think of like a play, I often think of like a movie or a play where there's a bunch of characters on there, and I am all of these characters, and I'm a different person with a different person. So you know how sometimes different people bring out different qualities in you.
Sure.
Sometimes,
So you're one way with me, you're a different way with your
yeah,
boyfriend, you're a different way with your parent, you're a different way at work.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes even at a different age. Like sometimes there's a little kid in me that comes out, or there is a kind of a hot mess teenager that comes out that just wants to be rebellious. And I want to grow up, and I also want to wake up. Those are two different things. So growing up meaning to be more loving and kind and evolved so that I'm not so attached to the outer world. And then waking up to remember, who am I? Why am I here? What is the bigger picture of my story that's calling for me? So again, coming back to that movie or that play, imagining that you are a witness in the audience watching the play or the movie and watching all of these parts of yourself playing out with different things with different people or different scenarios. And then you're also the director. So you can say, is that the most loving and noble way of me being in relationship with that situation? Probably not. And without judgment, I'm not saying, slam, bam, that's it, go to the corner kind of thing. I'm saying, what if I could try it a different way? And so I work these things out literally in my imagination, but also I get to try them out in real life with people too. And then reassessing it with myself instead of taking things personally, to really go, like those mistakes, right? Like sometimes we make mistakes. And again, going to the movie, you go take one, take two, take three. You keep, tweaking it and trying different things. And to me, that helps me not only wake up because I'm searching for a more noble, more loving way to be in relationship with life. And I'm also growing up. I'm learning new ways of being, new ways of thinking, new perspectives. And so it allows me to be open and curious and wonder. So the reason, again, that I didn't want to keep doing that is that I just felt like a victim most of the time because it's like someone said, we're not solar powered, meaning we're not dependent on our energy by the light in the world. We need to find that we are also light inside and that we can find our own solar energy inside, our solar power. And as long as we keep plugging to our financial bank account, our job roles, our relationships, and our health, and all these things that are outside of ourselves, we're constantly going to be drained instead of going in and saying, well, what is it that really sources me? And so when I say I'm retiring from rescuing, I'm retiring from the part that has made my identity a rescuer. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to do therapy anymore. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to care deeply about someone's healing journey. But I'm not going to feel that heavy burden that I have to do it, that over responsibility, that, oh my God, it's up to me to help them and I got to fix it. I think that's the big fix it mentality, right? We've talked about.
One of the things that we've also said is, it's like, if I care more for somebody's journey, for their health than they do, I now have put myself in a hero role or a rescuer role.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up to be taken down.
They need to, show up to their own healing as well. And most people do. It just is oftentimes as rescuers, and a very, an archetype that sits right next to that is the hero archetype, right? The heroes and the rescuers. Oftentimes we do put ourselves in that position of caring more about what somebody else is going through than they are showing up to it, than they're caring about it.
What you're really saying too is like, not that we're not caring about it, but we have to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
And you can't give them more than what they're willing to give themselves. And I think that's so important.
I was just talking to a client about that who like her husband is not in the same place that she is, and she wants to like get him there. I was like, you can't. You can't. He has to want to do it. He is where he is. Love him for where he is. And I know she does, that it just is, it's like we want more for especially the people that we love, right? But
Yeah.
I can see it for them, right?
And
Oh,
we
isn't
often
that
can, but if they're not
yeah.
asking you to show them the way or help them, then they can't. It doesn't matter. You could tell them everything. You could tell them all the secrets of everything, and they'll actually hate you for telling you them that because they wanted to find it out themselves.
Yeah.
And it hurts someone else's self-esteem and self-worth and self-confidence when we actually do it for them. It actually enables them from really stepping up and growing up and waking up.
So one of the things that I found for myself is when I find myself in that place of wanting to do for somebody, is I go to what you were talking about earlier of seeing myself as multiple roles in a movie. And I'm like, okay, where is it in me that I can actually do that for me? Because
Hmm.
there's some part of me that can do that for another part of me and not violate somebody else's sanctity.
That is a great witness too. Because, yeah, sometimes, if you're trying to rescue or fix or care for somebody else, or, you're really irritated about something that's going on in the news that you feel like helpless and hopeless. And if you can turn it towards and say, I wonder where I do that. Like,
Mm.
again, presencing that movie, right? That there's all these different parts of myself that show up. I wonder where I do that, where I might be out of integrity, or where I might be pushing away help or well-being, or I'm sabotaging or whatever it is. And then we can do that again with love and kindness with ourselves, as if we are the witness and the director of our own movie. And then we say, well, what does that part mean? I'll use another example. I had a client who needs to get some time off, and she knows like 9 months ahead of time that she needs to have that time off. But in her employment it says, sorry, this is a written rule, you cannot do that, da 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 da. I said, good God. I said, you got 9 months, you could have a baby in that time. Like, there's all kinds of things that can happen. And if you can start to prepare differently, know what might happen. And I said, if you went to your employer, do you feel like you are an equal with your employer, or do you feel like you're a teenager or a child? And she said, oh, I feel like I'm a little kid asking a parent for permission.
Mm.
And I said, as long as we do that, we are going to be a little kid and get sent to our room and no, you can't have this, and go to bed. Or I said, sometimes you can feel like a teenager, like, screw you, I'm going to do what I damn well please. And that's not my problem. It's my employer's problem. That's a little bit of a teenager, of course. But what would a loving human being do? How would they work in that relationship, especially when you have 9 months to kind of sort it out? Like, I often had an employer say to me one time, they said, don't come to me with problems. Come to me with solutions to the problem so that we can work it through together.
Mm.
So I might say, I would go to my employer and I'd say, hey, this is a problem I've been noticing that's going on, or an issue, or a struggle. Here are some of my solutions that I have. Can we work through this together to find out a really solution that will work for you and work for me, and that we can kind of move forward? As an employer, if I put myself on the other end, if someone came to me that way, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much a partnership that way. It's so much easier to work through that, because to come together, two heads together coming together, two hearts coming together, offers so much more possibilities than I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad, or vice versa. It's like, where's the space to really evolve together?
Yeah. And, I mean, to bring it back to, like retiring parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
that's a great place to start of I'm going to retire the piece of me that wants to go into drama
Right.
around this.
I'm
Oh,
going to
poor
retire my inner
me.
teenager. I'm going to retire my inner child. And
Or
not
even
shame them, just say I'm going to just go and take care of them. I'm going to put them to bed, or I'm going to go let them play in the playground.
or even the part of you that says, oh, poor me. Like this is what the rule says and I can't do anything about it. There's many options of like what we could look at to say, how do I do it differently? And really, this is what it comes down to is we're always looking for, how can I do things? How can I evolve? How can I do things differently? How can
Mhm.
I move to the next place? And I guess that's where this idea of retiring a part of ourselves became like, yeah, that would be a fun thing to explore, a different way of doing what we're looking to do for ourselves or with ourselves on a regular basis, and having maybe an ongoing practice of, like, all right, this week, what part of myself do I want to work on retiring? What's no
Yeah.
longer serving me?
And I'm going to put a caveat in there because how will you know when you've retired something?
Mm,
Because I know, and here's the thing: you think, oh, when you retire something, everyone's going to be all sunshine and roses and rainbows and butterflies and all, and yeah, maybe, but I would say 99% of the time, no, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be a pushback, and so when all of a sudden you've retired something, you have just moved to a totally different reality. You've moved to a completely different universe. I can guarantee that. And then all of a sudden, the people who were dancing with you before, because you've changed the dance steps, are going to be kind of like, "What? What are you doing? Why did you change that dance step?" It literally creates a change in that, and that happens in our life. That those individuals are either going to have to grow and evolve with you, and learn how to dance the new dance steps, or they will dance right on out of your life into something else.
yeah.
And so I would say, I want to prepare one's heart for that because that is part of actually the realization that you have let go or retired a part of yourself because the old outfit no longer fits.
Mm,
You can't squish your foot into that shoe anymore, Cinderella. It's not going to fit.
right.
You have a new prince. You have a new shoe that's coming.
I love that. And it reminds me of, there's a gentleman, and I can't think of his name, and he's got 4 stages of retirement. There's a TED Talk, he's got a book. I'll find all that information and put it in the show notes. And the 4 stages of retirement, the first one is like, woohoo, I retired. It's the party, right? And then after that, there's actual depression that kicks in. And a lot of people get stuck there. And I'm thinking about what you just said, of this is not just our lifetime of like, the only place that these 4 stages actually happen are when we retire from work. What you were just talking about is when you retire a part of yourself, initially there's that, yes, I did it. And then there's the pushback.
Hmm.
And when that pushback happens, there is the loss of identity. There's the potential loss of friends because they no longer dance the same dance with you. So you are living in a different reality. So you need to come to terms with that. And that takes you to the third and fourth stages. The third stage that he talks about is discovery, of like, start experimenting. What's it like in this new reality?
Hmm.
And then the fourth stage is like, ooh, I actually know what I want here, and I'm living my life mission essentially. So I've found my joy again. And
Yeah.
that's
And
where you finally own that new stage of life.
and I can't emphasize enough that having exemplars, like
Yeah.
whether they're real or imagined or fictional, it doesn't matter. But to have exemplars in your life that have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, that you can attune to, as well as friends or coaches that you can help to employ to help you. And also, just even a practice that you can start to be kind with yourself as you transition. Just like going back to the bride, that's why she has a maid of honor who literally will hold space for her as the bride. So the bride transitions into this whole new archetype.
Mm,
But there is a practice, and I think we've lost the rituals of practicing transitions.
yeah. This was such a joyful conversation for me, and I think the one of the most important things about it for me is seeing all the levels at which, like, so much of life is a metaphor for the rest of life. It symbolizes this, symbolizes that. I mean, we see the same thing on all these different levels, and so often we don't see those. So, if nothing else, starting to realize, like, oh, retirement is not just reserved for this stage in life where you're older and life
Mhm.
is, you're not working anymore. Like, it happens throughout our lives on multiple levels, happening all the time. So becoming aware of it and having that balance of the going inward, which is literally the retiring, and then the coming outward of the doing and finding, and then retiring, and
Yeah.
what we were talking
And you
about
can say,
earlier.
yeah, that was the old me. I retired that part. And I usually kind of throw it behind me. Just
I
as a
love it.
reminder for myself. It's like, yeah, that was the old me.
That was the old me.
That was the old. And sometimes, the old me likes to come up and dance again. I'm like, no, that was the old me. Back you go.
Back you go.
Back
Thanks
you
so
go.
much.
It's okay.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I loved your example of being and your vulnerability. So thanks for sharing that. If you, as our listeners, have something that you're working on retiring in your own lives, let us know. And if you'd like to work with us in any way, you can always find us on our website, thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com, or our business website, which is TSLP, which is the Soulful Leader Project.com. Oh, that one's TSLP.life, actually, TSLP.life. And we will see you all next week on the Soulful Leader Podcast. Thanks.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader Podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslak. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.